let's get the show rolling once more. And our next guest, we're going to have an awesome conversation with her. One of the reasons is she works in sort of like on the periphery of education, and I'm a big fan of that. I'll get into that in a hot second. But I always like to have that conversation when it comes to like learning and whatnot. But we're going to talk about keeping up with web performance. Why? Because I remember when I asked who was here for the first time, and I saw a lot of hands, you know. And I think it's amazing that a lot of people came together for the conference to learn about web performance. So, here to talk about keeping up with web performance, please put your hands together for Sharell Bryant.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. And yes, this talk is perfect in many ways. It's something that I wrote specifically for this conference, but has been something on my mind for a while now. And particularly for web performance, as you might have heard in the last 2 days, there's a lot happening. There's so many topics, and a lot has changed. So I first got introduced to web performance when I was working at my company on a feature, and I was told it was too slow to launch, and that got me excited enough to get really deep into web performance, and I got super passionate about it. And so I wanted to give this talk to all of you, and it's perfect that you're here. This is how I feel after a conference like this, like so excited. I'm so excited. I talked to so many people. I met everyone. I feel great. But then I feel very tired because my brain has consumed so much information that I don't know what to do with. So I'm also a little mixed emotions. And then I maybe get like a little worried. I start to look at my notes and see I wrote down 20 million things that I now need to follow up on. And I want to tell people right away. I'm like, oh, I didn't know what that meant. I need to look it up. And I get a little worried and I get a little overwhelmed. And I think, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to keep up with all of these things that are happening, because I don't even know maybe what was talked about or presented today, and it might change next week. So I was getting a little overwhelmed by that. But I started to think about why I felt confident. And I think cycling, we've been talking about it in Amsterdam, I've been inspired. I live in Brooklyn in New York, and I have been learning to get comfortable biking on the streets, and I really think about learning as a terms of like a journey and adventure instead of like these roadblocks. And so I want to take you all on how I think about learning both solo and also with folks, and I'm going to talk a bit about what we do at my company and other communities that I'm a part of. So, hi, I'm Sharell. That's me doing one of my many hobbies that I enjoy of playing guitar. But I am a self-taught developer. That's why I'm really excited about learning. I went to school for neuroscience, so first came to learning through like, how do we do it? What does the brain do? And that is another field that changes super rapidly. Most of my classes, I might have been reading a study that came out in that month, and that was really exciting for me. So when I came to programming, I was excited about how fast technology was moving, and that seemed like a career where I could constantly keep up, and that's actually part of my job. And so as part of that, after attending a programming retreat that I'll talk about in a little bit, I've been a software engineer at a company called Teachers Pay Teachers. We're an educational marketplace in a community where teachers can have stores on our site and upload resources and share it with other teachers. So it's something that I'm really passionate about. I'm passionate about education. My mom's a teacher, and it's really important to me to be able to build something that I know is going to be really useful. And the last 3 years, I've been an engineering manager. And so on the learning side, I've kind of approached it from what do my people on my team need to do and learn? What do they want to learn? How do I keep them engaged? And I luckily have a very supportive environment where we're encouraged to encourage our teams to do that and work together. I would also say I'm a committed lifelong learner, and I hope that by the end of this talk, you all will be too and convinced. I think the fact that you're here taking time to learn about web performance is already a great start, so hopefully I just give you some tools and ideas to continue that learning after you leave today. So like I said, what we'll cover, I'm going to talk a little bit about what continuous learning is, some attributes or traits that might make you a good lifelong learner. Then I'm going to talk about building your own learning practice. And then finally, what learning together looks like. So a few notes. Learning looks different for everyone. In this talk, there are probably more questions than facts. And you'll hear that questions are a big way that I actually help learn and that we can help each other learn. But that's just to say, I'm going to throw a lot of ideas. Some might resonate, some might not. But the idea is that it might work for you. You might want to tell a colleague, and that's the best I've found when we talk about learning. Also, my examples are going to focus on performance. I really wanted to give this talk particularly at Performance Now because that's the first kind of web performance is the first area where I felt at my company like I was an expert. I started as a junior developer, and then I had people coming to me because I had an interest in it, and I took time to learn. And that was really exciting, and it made me have more of an impact. So I'll be talking about my experience through the web performance lens, but honestly, all of this topics can be applied to anything within your tech life or outside of it. And I do have one ask, which is that we all stay curious during this talk. You'll hear that staying curious and vulnerability is a big part of learning. So I will start us off. What do I mean about continuous learning, and why should I care? Also, some of you might think, I don't know, some of you or people you might meet think, I already know enough, I'm good. Probably not you because you're here taking time to learn, but something that I've really enjoyed is continuous learning helps us keep up with changing technologies. As we talked about, metrics have changed in the last few years. Even just when I've been working on web performance, the things that I first learned and thought were complete facts have completely changed, but the basis has been the same. And I think that's been really cool to understand that to do my job well, I have to keep learning. I have to understand what new tools are available. I have to know what standards. So it's almost like imperative and part of my job description. It also enables innovation and creativity. I found that the best work is done when my team is able to take time to learn that new tool. When they're on Twitter, when they're talking with people from different companies, they come back and bring ideas and apply them with that combination, and also understanding what we're doing as a business creates a really awesome environment for innovation and all of us learning together. And I think this allows us to reach our full potential. So that's my sell on why you would want to learn how to learn, as I like to say, and also got from this article by Erica Anderson from the Harvard Business Review. And I thought this did a really awesome job of taking research that kind of aligns with a lot of these topics. So the first quote I wanted to talk about here is, learning requires a willingness to experiment and become a novice again and again, an extremely discomforting notion for most of us. Raise your hand if you have recently had an idea of, I want to learn something, but it seems like way too hard. Yes, learning is really hard, and it's really hard being uncomfortable. Many people raise their hands. I definitely feel this as well, but I think if you're in that place, if you're feeling that now, that means you're in a pretty good position for being accepting to learning and understanding. And when I talk about learning, sometimes it might be like this. You might think of school, writing notes down, you might be listening to a talk, but I think an important part of continuous learning and other aspects that they mention in the article as well is learning is doing things. It's scanning the horizon for growth opportunities. It's pushing yourself to acquire radically different capabilities while still performing your job. So this sounds hard. I don't know if any of you, when I've had a few different roles in my company, and there have been times where I need to just push out this feature, and I need to just do that. I don't know if I have time to grow, but I've learned that really when I have had managers and companies and environments that have fostered that for me, I've done a much better job over time and have been able to execute way more quickly. So I really resonated with this. So I like to actually, instead of the studying, I like to be more like this cat. There's some very cute cats at the hotel that some of us are staying in, and they're very curious. And I like to imagine this when I think about learning, not necessarily digesting facts or information, but asking questions and being curious. So what does learning to learn look like? I really loved that they had research and found these 4 different traits or attributes that they found from lifelong learners to really succeed. And these are aspiration, self-awareness, curiosity, and vulnerability. And I wanted to walk through each of these and talk a little bit about how I view them and how it might be useful for you all. So the first one, aspiration. This is one I needed. There's a few words in here I just needed to go to the dictionary to define, to kind of base myself. And for aspiration, a hope or ambition of achieving something. With some definitions, they're very vague, but the words that resonate for me here are hope and ambition. That's exciting. That's something I want to be doing. There are some times where you have to learn something where you're really not excited about it. And I don't have any aspiration, and I say, actually, I want to be doing this other cool thing over here. But the thing is, they discovered that when we don't want to learn something, we tend to focus on the negative. We tend to focus on the roadblocks. They gave a great example of, has anyone ever come to you with this new framework is way better, we should move everything over, or this new tool is way better, we should move everything over, and been that seems like a lot of work. I don't know if we need to do that. That seems like it's going to be too much. But if you were the person who's really excited about it, it's well, yes, it's going to be a lot of work, but imagine the things that we'll be able to do. There's just a way and difference in perspective. And so they took this and thought that you can actually create and gain aspiration for yourself. So I want you to take, and you can think about this, write it down, tweet it, whatever you need to do. I want you to first think about something that you're not excited or that you're really scared to learn about, or dig deeper in. So I'll let you think about that. Mine is something that was mentioned in the last 2 days, is memory leaks. Every time we have an issue, there's somebody who's awesome on my team, and I'm he's gonna know, and he's very excited to work on it. But that's something where I'm I should go deeper. I need to go deeper in that. But there are things that are, for various reasons, scary about that. And so now I want you to think about something you're really excited to learn about. Write it down, think about maybe why, and it could just be that it's cool. There are so many things that I'm excited about just because it seems cool, and that's totally valuable. But maybe think about how the difference in the language and how you think about it, how your body reacts, maybe how you would talk to people about those topics. And take that to get yourself excited about learning. So things you can do, you can focus on action versus the roadblocks. You can be objective and why something might be interesting to learn. I find that there's, even in things that I feel are boring or dreadful, there's always one thing I can cling on to. And I like to ask myself or others, what will we gain from learning this? So I'm pretty sure, and probably have asked my teammate, would really like if the rest of the team learned a lot more about memory leaks. It would be really helpful if there's not just one person or a few people who are interested in a topic. That's great motivation. I love helping my teammates. That's awesome. And I just automatically there maybe got excited about learning something. Also, a trick is imagine what you could accomplish in a year. If you took a time to learn something, you're that's going to be really hard, but what could you do that you're not able to do now? And that might change your perspective a little bit. So these are just tips you can use. The next one is self-awareness. And this is having an accurate assessment and understanding of what you know and what you don't know. And this, for me, especially getting into web performance, was the biggest thing. When I first started, I just didn't know what I didn't know. I was tasked with do a performance audit, and I was what? And my manager was here's web page test. I was great. And then I basically took it from there and used a bunch of other awesome tools. And together, I started to learn over time. It took a lot of getting things wrong. It took a lot of, oh, wait, I'm learning about something else that I had no idea of, or maybe oh, actually, I haven't taken into consideration what different browsers are doing, or what metrics I'm looking at. Things we've all covered today that I just didn't even know I was supposed to know. So you already, again, have an advantage being here and getting access to just the information, even if you don't have full understanding yet. And they found that having this self-awareness is really important to being a lifelong learner. So here's a few more questions that you can ask yourself. What's something you know really, really well? Maybe it's performance as a whole. Maybe it's something else. So I want you to think about that. And what are some facts do you have to support that you think you know that really well? I might say for performance, people come to me as an expert. Like I have made performance changes on our site and showed that it had impact on the business. I was able to give a talk on it, but I might have some other facts that say, oh, but I don't know about this other thing, and that's probably something I should explore. Another way of gaining more self-awareness is, would others agree with your assessment or not? And this is not in a bad way. This is not to say that others would say, oh, no, I don't believe they know about that. I've actually gotten the opposite, where people helped me figure out what I already knew when I didn't even know that I knew it. One great example, which I loved, and which is also really exciting about a field like web performance that allowed me to do, is I was a more junior developer, but I was able to take on this role of teaching because it was a topic that I had spent a lot of time learning and getting hands-on. And it was like there were other senior developers who just had other expertise and didn't know. And that was a really awesome way for me to realize, wait, I do know something. I should not be as intimidated as I have been. You can also ask these questions about topics that you don't know really well, and you'll get some interesting answers as well. Again, I don't have the answers for you, but I have a lot of questions, and hopefully they will guide you. But I do have some advice on how you could approach this. You could solicit feedback. This could be talking to your coworkers. This could be asking them, hey, what do you always come to me for? Like, what would you consider that I'm really good at? You could talk to some people you consider experts. I've seen a lot of that happening here at this conference, which is awesome. You can teach someone with little to no knowledge on the topic. This was the best way I learned about performance. I remember I had to give a meeting to stakeholders around why we could launch a feature. And I needed to explain web performance to people who had not an idea in the world. And that was when I really learned a lot. And the thing was, I didn't even present to them like everything I learned. They did not care. They just cared what I had come to, and I felt that confidence that I really understand. I'm able to answer their questions. I would also suggest tracking your progress over time. Something that's been really beneficial for me when I was first starting is I wrote down at the end of every Friday like something I learned, and it could just be like a word or acronym. It could be anything. And we actually, when I came to my company, we had something called TWIL. I don't know where this is, but it's I guess, acronym that stands for This Week I Learned. And we would just come there, say, This week I learned. And it could be like, this week I learned about this debug tool. Or like, this week I learned how to do this and the shortcut, key shortcut. And it was a great way to just like track progress over time. I recently looked at some old notes I'd taken, and when a newer developer was asking me like kind of like how she should think about her learning progress, and I was amazed by the things that I didn't know when I was still building software. So that was really cool to see. Okay, so going to curiosity and vulnerability, I'm quoting one of my favorite folks, Brené Brown, who is a researcher, professor, podcaster, highly recommend books and her podcasts. And I love this quote about curiosity and vulnerability. And she says, choosing to be curious is choosing to be vulnerable because it requires us to surrender to uncertainty. And as you've heard with the it depends, there's a lot of uncertainty in web performance, but that's also exciting, and it gives us a time to be curious and vulnerable. But she also adds that this wasn't always a choice. We're born curious. Like, think about when you're a kid, and maybe you're just doing something, or you're that cat, you're like just figuring out the lay of the land. We were born curious, but over time, we learn that curiosity, like vulnerability, can lead to hurt. It can make us feel embarrassed that we don't know something. It can be really hard to admit that you might be wrong. And she writes that as a result, we return to self-protecting, choosing certainty over curiosity, armor over vulnerability, and knowing over learning. And this like totally resonates with me. The times I honestly felt like I learned the most when nobody had expectations about what I knew. Like I was like, oh, well, they don't expect me to know anything, so I'm just gonna keep learning, versus I have to constantly tell myself it's okay to say I don't know something, it's okay to rely on my coworkers, and it's okay, that's the first step to being able to figure out my learning plan. So I highly encourage you to stay curious, and my biggest thing is going to be asking questions. Here are just some example questions that somebody might take who is completely new. How can I make time to work on performance at work? What does that look like? And I'm going to be talking a little bit about learning at work towards the end of this talk. I wonder what metrics are best to track for our website. You have lots of awesome talks this week about this. You could also ask, like, why are others excited about this topic? Like, you might have a topic where you're like, oh, that never really like intrigued me, but I see that a bunch of other people are really excited about it. Like, let me go talk to them. Like, let's get energized about it and let's stay curious. It might not change your mind. You might still think something's boring, but you did just take like one small step towards being more curious, to expanding your knowledge, and I think that's all about incremental change. Another aspect is get comfortable with vulnerability. If you feel like a novice, I suggest write down what you do know. I can't emphasize enough how important this was for me in terms of my learning practice. I kept thinking, get through the week. I'm like, I don't know anything. And then I wrote down and I was like, oh, I do know some things. Turns out if somebody asks you to give a talk or if you're writing a blog post, you'll turn out and realize you know some things. So that could be a way to encourage yourself. I also highly suggest practice saying, I don't know. This was big for me, and you need an environment where there's comfortable, which I'll talk about as well, but get really comfortable saying, I don't know. Or maybe you do know something, but I use this a lot. I'm not sure, but this is my current understanding. That, for me, opens up a conversation. It lets the person know my background. It engages a dialogue, and then I'm able to actually be in a place of learning instead of saying, oh yeah, I know what that is, and nodding along and not saying anything. That really blocks us off from gaining new knowledge. And this is a little not related to tech or anything like that, but get used to trying new things. As I mentioned, I think I mentioned already, I love getting new hobbies. Like every week, my friends are like, you have a new hobby. I've been knitting, I have some skateboarding. I'm not great at any of them, but I just practice being actually really bad at things. And then when I have to go to work or do something and it needs to happen, or maybe there's a topic I'm really scared of, I practice that muscle with something fun and exciting of trying something new and getting really comfortable with that. It's still really hard. I've fallen off my skateboard many times. Okay, so now with those traits we talked about, we have some understanding what might help us. Let's take that and think about how to build your own learning practice. So I'm taking a lot of inspiration from a place called Recurse Center. It's based in New York. Right now, they're doing virtual sessions, and this is actually the place where I really got passionate about self-directed learning. I mentioned that I kind of made a switch from science to programming, and that was through Recurse Center. I'd been learning on my own, and then I found there was a community where I could go for 12 weeks and learn about a topic, but there are no teachers. Everyone is there to work on something. You get there the first day, and it's like, okay, work on your code. It can be truly whatever, as long as it's related to you becoming a better programmer, and you do that for 12 weeks. To some people, this sounds terrifying, especially when you've been at work or school where people have been telling you what you're supposed to learn. This doesn't mean that we don't need community or classes or a curriculum, but it just means that it's an environment where that's self-driven and intrinsically motivated. So I went to revisit some of the pages on Recurse Center to understand what they've learned about that, as that's the place where I felt like I had the most growth in my learning. And so this is a quote from John Holt. Learning is not the product of teaching. Learning is the product of the activity of the learners. And that's really what Recurse Center's philosophy is based around, the self-direction. And I believe John Holt was a leader in this idea of unschooling, which starts with the belief that people are naturally curious, which, as you can tell from the beginning of my talk, I also very much believe that, and that schooling hinders curiosity. I'm definitely not against schooling. I was a fairly good student, but I think there were definitely some aspects of being curious that resonated with me most and enabled my learning the most. I loved working in the lab, or I loved working on a project where I could take some learnings instead of a multiple choice quiz was really hard for me without having any context. And so I really enjoyed this concept of unschooling and self-direction, and I think that's something that I've really taken into my life. And so they've come up with 3 self-directives that they kind of have found that successful people who are lifelong learners, who really are self-motivated to learn, have. And I wanted to go through some of these and talk through how you might be able to leverage this for yourself. So they are: work at the edge of your abilities, build your own volitional muscles, and learn generously. So work at the edge of your abilities. Work on projects that will challenge you. Have stretch goals. I mentioned that one of the first ways I was able to work on web performance is I was kind of set off with this task. That's because my manager gave me the opportunity. He believed I could do it. He told me I could do it. He didn't, there was a deadline, but he felt made me feel very supported. And we knew it was like something, he was like, I know you don't know how to do that yet, but like you can. And that was like so life-changing for me to work at the edge of my abilities. I learned way more than I would have if I just kept taking tickets or responsibilities that I just felt comfortable in. So I really resonate with this is something that really drives learning. But you don't want to be in a situation where you're doing something so difficult that it's discouraging. You want to make incremental process. And this is why when building your learning practice, I encourage you to think about like, what's that next step? You might have a goal that's a year away. I would say work backwards and break down that goal until you get to what can I do like right now? And it might just be like follow someone on Twitter. It might be save this YouTube video so I can watch it next week. But that's that first step. And over time, you will get there. Build your volitional muscles. This is another one where I needed to revisit the dictionary for volition. It's the power to make your own decisions. This is also really resonates with my values and what I found is best for learning. Like, sure, I worked with my boss on web performance, but that was something I decided I was excited about. I felt personally motivated by. I really saw the connection of, wait, if my job is to make the lives of teachers easier, that means making a very fast website, and that's important to me. And then also, I was able to make decisions about how I learned that. He gave me suggestions, but he didn't say exactly how to do it. And this really helped me build my ability to drive my own learning, and something I've taken when I haven't had that support outside of school or doing work and doing something else. So I would encourage you, as much as you can, make your own decisions about what you want to learn and how to do it. And learn generously. So I know we're in the section where we're talking about kind of building your own personal learning culture, but I love that they mention learning generously. And what this means is sharing your learnings, learn with others. We've mentioned, many others have said sharing your learnings is important. I think what's important as well is like, it's also supporting others when they don't understand something and understanding that we all benefit from each other's knowledge. So when I build my own learning practice, sometimes I start with a goal, like I talked about. So I think about these questions. How do I want to grow? What gets me excited? And why? What does success look like? What's my goal and my timeline on it? And what's something I can do right now, today? And how do I want to stay accountable? So here's an example that I might have for somebody on my team or what I would do. So let's say I want to learn more about Core Web Vitals. We've heard a lot about them. And it's because I care about our users having a good experience. Success looks like, well, I would really like it if I was able to explain this topic to my coworkers. That would feel like success to me. I think that's a really important part. Like, success looks different for everyone. Of course, you might have different objectives, but I think when it comes to your own learning and success, that's something that is way more motivating when you set that yourself. So what can I do today? Oh, well, I've seen that I can go to web.dev, so I'm probably going to go do that today and like learn more and then take it from there. I'm also going to commit to a date to present to the engineering team, since I think that's the best way to explain my topic. So I want to commit to a date to set myself a timeline with the engineering team on what I've learned. And then you revisit your goals. So you make a commitment. Said, I'm going to revisit my goals every 6 weeks, write notes on what I've learned. This is pretty, I'm a pretty organized and like goal-driven person. So for me, this really works for a learning practice. This might not work for you for a learning practice, but I do use the same principles when I talk to folks who I'm talking through career conversations on. We start off with like, how do you like to learn? Do you like reading? Do you like writing? If they're like, I'm not sure, I ask them what's the last thing you learned and how did you do it? And we talk about some ideas. And then I ask them, what do you care about? Because I often find that what somebody cares about really helps motivate them. You get that aspiration piece. And they might say, I've had people say, like, I really care about the business doing well. Or they might say, oh, I really care about my colleagues having the right tools to do their job. And that's something I'm really passionate about. And so I would help them set a learning goal based off of that. I also love hearing what people hate or dread doing and why. That often gets to the fear that people have that really inhibits learning. And so if I have an idea of that, I will first make sure that they feel extra supported when doing something. I've had, for example, people who hate giving talks. They're great experts on it. People would definitely benefit from their learnings. They're like, I do not want to give a talk. They have been open, though, to giving a presentation with somebody else who's a really good speaker but doesn't know as much about the topic. And guess what? That person really wants to learn from this person, and that's a great connection. So these are the kinds of conclusions you can get to by asking yourself or other people about that. And I think what's really important is, what resources do you need? And so when we think about resources, you might think about books, you might think about blog posts, podcasts, you might think about a conference like this, an online course. But some resources that I found are really helpful are like an accountability partner. Like, I just want to have somebody on my team who also wants to learn this, or like somebody who works at another company so that I could talk about it. I'm going to get coffee with them like next week. That could be a resource. It could be a mentor of somebody that you really respect and want to learn from. And I think one of the most important resources that we don't talk about enough is dedicated time. Like, time and opportunity are the biggest resources for learning. When I had dedicated work time, support, and stretch opportunities, you are in a perfect place to continue your learning journey. So I want to revisit the cat. We're going to stay curious. So I want to remind you, learning can and should be fun. So those are all very like things that you have to do, but and that's often fun. But these are some things I do to help my learning journey outside of work. I try to explain a web performance topic to my friends. As you can imagine, folks were asking me why I was going to Amsterdam and what my talk was about, and I was explaining it's about web performance. My best friend works in audio journalism, and I tried to explain LCP to him over a burrata at dinner. It actually was so interesting. I ended up talking about, well, at the end of the day, we're trying to find these metrics that really help the user experience. And I talked him through that, and he was like, oh, that's really cool. Like, what does the equivalent to that look like in audio journalism? Like, what could I do? And just talking about it in that way and these like abstract ideas like helped me like solidify my understanding a lot more. And it was just fun to hang out with my friend and talk to him about web performance. Practice being a novice. I already talked about this. Find ways to get comfortable with doing that. Maybe pick up a new hobby that you've always wanted to try. And if you need suggestions, I have plenty because I don't have time to get to all of mine. So finally, we'll talk about fostering a learning culture, more of this learning together. And I'll talk a little bit about my company, Teachers Pay Teachers, like I talked about. These are the people who I do it for, the 7 million teachers worldwide who use our site, the people who have their careers and livelihoods set on having stores here, and who also, I have friends who tell me, oh, I use that all the time when I was a substitute teacher and like I needed something really quickly. I reminded myself of this power of expertise and really believing in teachers and educators. And I'm really happy that we also believe in that just internally as a company, which aligns great with my values. And so I would love to talk a little bit about, I would reference this blog post by Kwame Thomason, who works at Teachers Pay Teachers, and he talked about how to build your learning culture. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what that looks like for us as an example. So we have something that I really enjoy, which is called Eng Learning Fridays. We call it ELF sometimes and use a great ELF emoji for using it. But this is half of the day where it's just dedicated to engineers learning. You're not working on sprint work. You're just working on getting better and learning. And the reason why we think this is important, I've already talked about. It helps us innovate. It helps us be creative. And some ways that we've structured this is we have learning guilds. These are folks who come together, we get priorities, and I, for example, ran a learning guild on leadership. We went through different leadership topics that people were interested in. Our tech leads were like, I don't know that much about project management. I actually know a lot about this other thing, and I want to learn, and I feel like I don't have time during the week when I'm supposed to already know this. So we brought a learning guild together. Again, there was a leader, but actually during each learning guild presentation, different folks presented topics. So really, I was just the facilitator. Different people were the experts throughout the room. We were all learning together and doing a workshop, and that worked really well. For folks who are less interested in a learning guild situation, you could also use a project guild. So these were topics that maybe is sitting in the backlog, maybe no one's prioritized, they're important, and you want to take time for discovery. This gives somebody a really awesome time to explore something that's maybe not on their team. I've had folks who really work on the back end in our APIs be really interested in a topic like web performance, and my team, who's the experts on that internally, have a lot of things in our backlog we would love folks to work on. And we would love to support them in learning. So having a project guild around that, it was a fantastic idea. And we also take the time to do workshops and internal presentations. At the end of every learning period, we call them ELF seasons, we have an engineering learning fair, which is very fun. And each group gives a presentation. So I really loved this past season. We had a group work on web accessibility, and they created a whole workshop on us on how to use the screen reader things to discover. And that was a way that we all learned that topic. I wasn't in that guild. I still got the benefit from it. This has worked really well for us in like up-leveling our engineers and having people feel more confident that they're able to keep up with the technology and tools and problems that we're facing every day. And so I've mentioned some benefits of learning together, but you get to work with colleagues outside of your direct team. I think this is awesome. The way our teams are split up, I was managing our platform teams internally. So they're focused maybe on our web platform team, our folks focused on front end, maybe our service framework team have folks more on the back end. We have product teams who are working on our amazing products. We have a lot of ways we interact, but we don't maybe get to work with each other enough or explore and learn together. And I found that this not only like helps us grow, but it helps people feel more confident asking questions. Like it's really great for us. I always like on a platform engineering team, I was like, I hope we are cultivating an environment where people feel free to ask us questions and we can help with adoption. And ELF has been a really awesome way for us to do this. It's also more access to stretch opportunities. Sometimes with work that's product feature related, it's under really tight deadlines, there's really strict requirements, and maybe there's not that same like opportunity for that time I was talking about that's really needed to go deep. This allows us to have somebody maybe try project management for the first time on their project guild. They get support, but it's a way for them to experiment. They're allowed to make mistakes and fail without a lot of pressure and for the act of learning, and they usually accomplish a lot because, like I said, learning helps us innovate and get better. And it's given us like various skill sets that aren't just on the technical topics we've covered. So I've had people, seen people write blog posts from what they learned because they're so intentional about like what they consumed and understood that they were like, oh, that makes a perfect blog post, or give a great presentation as part of it. So these are all benefits we got from learning together. And I just wanted to quickly show this graphic of that Kwame put together for how we think about our learning cycles, and they are cycles. They feed into each other. We use feedback a lot. I wonder how many times I've said the word learning in this presentation, I'm wondering, but so we start off with, well, I'll just start at a random point, maybe our learning priorities. And so these might be things that I, as a manager, my job was to collect, like, what are people stuck on? Like, what are the things that people come to me and they're like, I know I need to do this, but I don't feel like I have the tools or knowledge to do that. We all get input and feedback and create these learning priorities and then see who's interested in, like, leading a guild around that. And they might be an expert on it, or they might just be like, I'm not an expert at all. I just really want to learn about this and I'm passionate about it. And we give them the right support that they need to form the guild, and other people sign up and join. Then they schedule learning sprints over the weeks, they're supported, and then we measure the value through surveys, through other inputs to understand like how we might do better. So really taking the learning to heart. So you might say, well, I don't have that. I don't have 10% of my time to spend just learning or this structure, and that's okay. There's other examples I found of how we can all learn together that are really exciting. Hackathons, watching a video. I know some of you are here together on your teams. I found that that's really awesome when you can do that. It's starting a book club, and like I mentioned, weekly demos have been an awesome way for us to all learn together. I remember at my first job, when it was my first programming job, I would go to demos and I would have no idea what they were talking about, like truly no clue, especially if it was something that like an engineer who'd been there many years. But over time, I was just like the exposure to seeing the demos, to seeing how people work really enabled me to learn, and I was so grateful that people were willing to share. And I wanted to just highlight some ways that we're always learning, and these might be things that you do, but I view them as learning opportunities. So I love retrospectives. I don't know how many of you do types of retros, but the reason I love a retrospective is because it's really an opportunity to reflect and get better. And during my team ones, we do a lot of helping each other and calling out when we did help each other. So you might see things like, this person really helped me when I was stuck on this bug. That is awesome. That encourages learning together. I figured out that somebody learned something new from somebody else. I can tell them like, okay, well then now you go teach it. We get to reflect on, hey, we ran into this problem actually. We should do something else next time. I love retrospectives. I think those are an important time for you to figure out how you can learn as a team together. And when I talk about retrospectives, what we just do on my team is like what went well, what didn't go well, and action items. And the way we do it that I also really like about learning together is we give our team time to just like write in silence all together. We're like, we're virtually now. And so we all take time and everybody is able to like digest, and that really gives different people who digest information and communicate in different ways access to saying, oh, I need a little time to think about this. I want to see what other people wrote. I want to like build on top of things. And I found this works better than just everyone kind of speaking at the same time, and gives us more opportunity to all learn from each other. Another great aspect of that is postmortems. When an incident happens, especially around web performance, that's actually a great way to let people know from my team why it's important. Because usually people tend to care when things go wrong and when customers complain. And so that's a great opportunity for me to say, hey, this is why you should learn about all of the tooling we put in place. Like we have Lighthouse CI, we have this Lighthouse runner that we can help you with. Like we have a web page test to set you up with. We have synthetic testing, we have RUM. And my team has been trying to adopt all of these things, but it's really awesome to give people, hey, like this is a learning that you can do and learn from our past individual experiences that are specific to your company. Other places where I found a lot of benefit are like reviewing others' pull requests and design docs, even if I'm not writing them, something that I would feel kind of scared at first if I wasn't an expert, but then I realized both as somebody getting them and just having a culture where people are encouraged to learn, like just asking a question and being like, why is this here? I don't understand. Can you explain this a little bit more? Like, that's helped me find things in my code. I'm like, oh, I'm so glad you asked that, actually. That's kind of wrong. Or I've done the same, and people have been, oh, actually, this is what this is for. Here's a link. And that can be a place to do that if you have the right culture for it. And the one thing that people always tell me has benefited them from the people I've onboarded is pair programming. I think this looks different for different people. Some people like coding alone, but I think there's something so special about getting into maybe a tool together and just sitting down and seeing what somebody else is working on hands-on that doesn't translate in a talk or a workshop. So I talked about creating an inclusive learning environment. This is really important. You can do all the things I talked about before, but have an environment where people aren't encouraged to do this. And it's really stifling, and it's really hurts everyone in the long run. So I think it's important to create a place where you encourage asking and answering people's questions. Consider implementing some social rules because that's the terms Recurse Center uses, and I'll go on to talk about an example, but think about how you work together. Like, what does that look like? Like, how do we all participate in that together? Think about different people's learning styles. Like I said, it's not always the same. So I think that's super important. And then I found that the biggest thing I learned is that I'm not going to be an expert on everything as hard as I try. I'm a big perfectionist. But what I can do is ask the right questions to the people who know more than I do. And I can bring in people who have way different perspectives than I do. I found that because of my science research background, A/B testing was a natural place for me. I felt really comfortable. I was like, oh, great. There's a control, there's testing, there's results, and same with performance. I was like, oh, there's lab data, there's field data. My past experience that had nothing to do with web performance helped that click in my brain. And this is one of the social rules that Recurse Center has. They have 4. I would encourage you to go onto their website, and I know lots of people have taken inspiration for this, but I would say this is one of the main things that really helped me feel comfortable in a learning environment. And this one is like no feigning surprise. Here's an example. Dan says, "What's the command line?" Carol says, "Wait, you've never used the command line?" Carol might really genuinely have that question or be surprised, but that leaves Dan feeling maybe a bit stifled, maybe feeling like, oh, am I supposed to know that? It doesn't encourage that person to feel like they should explain that they have the opportunity to learn and grow. And having an environment where this was agreed upon was so crucial for me. So I encourage you to take a look, think about what might be crucial for your environment. We're at the end. I've given you a lot of information directly tied to how you might think about learning. I want you to take everything you've learned from the few talks and think about what your bike path might look like. And some final thoughts that really, if you don't know anything else, don't take anything else. Learning's a practice. You have to keep doing it over and over again, and that's why you should make it exciting. Ask questions. Remember the feeling of being at this conference and what that felt like and how you can incorporate that in your day-to-day. Find your why. I found my why at my particular company. I find my why about different things I do to really keep me inspired. Find your why and contribute back to your community, whatever that looks like, and can be including this awesome performance community. Finally, have fun and stay curious. And thank you all so much for your time.
Amazing. Step on into my office, please.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm good. Good to see you.
Likewise, man. We were supposed to connect a little while back, but we're both busy.
Yeah.
You know. I know you're wondering how many times you said learning.
Yes.
Since you asked the question, it was 27. But no one's counting.
But no one's counting.
Yeah, exactly. How you doing?
I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good. I was adjusting to the jet lag, but I'm good.
Okay. I mean, I know New York's, Brooklyn's in the building. BK, stand up.
Yes, yes.
All right. Maybe let's get to some questions because I got some of my own after. Let me see here. Excellent talk, by the way.
Thank
That's
you.
how this one question starts. How do you prioritize what to learn next? What are your thoughts on generalization versus specialization?
Oh, great question. My thoughts on how do you decide what to learn next? I would say is what feels I would say I do it on what feels most actionable and exciting. So like, if I put something down and I'm like, I want to learn it next, but I'm like, I don't have anything that I could do like right now. I take a step back and I think, actually, maybe let's choose something that's maybe it's more relevant. I always like to learn about something that's relevant to me at the time. And that's what we use for our learning priorities. Like, it's cool to just learn something for fun. And there's definitely times where I do that, but I definitely prioritize based off of like, honestly, it's usually what's bringing me pain or more like what I want to be excited about.
All right.
And I found like both beneficial to learning, but also enables you to like problem solve a lot better.
Nice.
And the person asked also about
thoughts on generalization versus specialization.
Yeah, this was something I was interested when I was a manager and taking people through career coaching. Different people have different interests, and I really like an environment where you can do both. I find them really valuable, and I think because we're on teams, you can be a specialist who is, if you have these skills like asking questions and being able to collaborate, it's definitely okay to have to specialize or to be a generalist. I think what I really like and what I try to think about is like, what's my impact? Versus like, and what's going to drive that most impact. So the times where I've specialized and kind of I thought about this for myself, I thought like, oh, am I getting pigeonholed into like being a front end engineer? But actually that worked really well for me. I then like became a manager and I ended up managing a DevTools team. They had way more hands-on experience with Kubernetes and other things that I didn't, but I took my learnings from my front end specialties and helped them through that. So I think depending on your interest, there's always time to like figure out what your impact can be.
Okay. Thank you very much for that question.
Yeah, thank
you. Just to remain on time, we're going to keep it moving. But if they have questions for you online, where can they find you?
Yes, you can find me on Twitter. It's Sharell, my name without the A, just to make it confusing. And I'll also be here afterwards. I would love to talk to you.
Amazing. Thanks for your time.
Thanks so much.
Put your hands together again.